Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Legacy Running Podcast. I always say this, but I am even more excited than I normally am for this episode because we are talking about cartilage. And can I just lay it straight with you guys? Some of y'all are freaking the freak out about your cartilage, and I'm just going to say I'm not. I'm not worried about it. It is my favorite tissue in the body for so many reasons. And honestly, I think one of the biggest reasons that I'm the most excited about cartilage and I'm the most excited about today's episode is because this was one of my biggest light bulb moments going through my orthopedic residency and fellowship. I just remember learning about the properties of cartilage that I did not learn about in PT school. Can I just tell you that? I'm just going to be so blunt with you. I did not learn about any of this stuff in PT school, but I learned about the properties of cartilage and how resilient it is and how it has the ability to turn over and grow and change. And I just grew up I was born in the 90s, 94. And just for context, and I just feel like I was living in the world of running is bad for your knees. You need to protect your cartilage. As you get older, you shouldn't be running and jumping and all of this stuff. And I watched my parents' generation just continue to believe that day in and day out. And as I was in PT school, I was in PT school, I was really seeing that the opposite was true of wow, specifically from a bone density standpoint, if we want to increase our bone density, we need to be jumping when we're 80 to maintain the not plumpness, but maintain the ability to turn over bone and for it to be really strong. And then so I was just reading these articles and learning about people that worked with older adults and during PT school and just seeing oh my gosh, these older adults that were doing drop hangs where they were holding onto something and then they would drop from it and a controlled environment would increase their bone density. And it was extremely safe for them to do this kind of loaded procedure because it was in a class and all this stuff. And this is kind of a tangent, but my mind was blown when it was wow, exercise is so incredibly powerful. And I think a lot of us have been instilled that if my cartilage has osteoarthritis in it, I'm screwed. Or these degenerative changes in our body are not normal and are a result of doing too much. So when I made it to my orthopedic residency and fellowship and we were being tested and drilled on okay, this person has osteoarthritis. What specific exercise are you doing to nourish and improve their tolerance? I was oh my gosh, there are actually things that we can be doing really specific to the tissue to allow it to recover, rebuild, modify, all of the things. So I want to bring today's episode to you to get you out of the mindset that running is bad for your knees. Running is bad for your hips. If you have degenerative, quote unquote, damage on your MRI, on your x-ray, it is normal. It's normal. As you age, you are going to see wrinkles and aging on the outside of your body. Why would that not be true on the inside of your body? I always say this to my clients, when they go to get their MRI results or their x-ray results or, do a follow-up consultation, they are 100% of the time so scared crapless the next time that I see them because they've been taught about all of these things. They've been shown all the findings in their body, anterior superior labral tear with, mild osteoarthritis into the hip and proximal hamstring tendinopathy and tendinosis of the gluteal tendon. The amount of times I've seen that freaking MRI reading, I'm it's every single person that I work with. Okay. So it's not special to me anymore, but they see these things, they freak out. And honestly, to me, I'm okay, it's kind of relatively normal. If we were to X-ray, MRI, the rest of your body, you would probably be afraid of the other things that you were seeing. I'm just going to say that there's this crazy study that talks about the prevalence of rotator cuff tendinopathy or tears in our shoulders. And if we're 40 years old, there's a 40% chance that we're going to have a tear in one of our rotator cuff muscles. 50%, 60, 60%, 70, 70%. We're seeing that around a little bit less than half of the population is walking around with a labral tear, which is a form of cartilage degeneration. We're seeing disc bulges. Disc bulges are extremely common in adults as they age, and a lot of the times are asymptomatic. So I warrant the healthy fear. I warrant getting things looked at and working with a medical team. But I just don't warrant the fear that we're like walking in when there's just so much that we can do. And let's just freaking get into it because I'm just so hyped up. Okay, so kind of lay of the land for today. I'm gonna go over like 3 things that I know to be relatively true. And I'm saying relatively true because science is evolving. Okay, like there's never like an absolute this is 100%, but like to the best of our knowledge and to the best of our ability to know, these are the things that we're believing that we're seeing in the research and we're seeing from, just evidence and clinical studies and even anecdotal evidence. So I'm going to go through the likes and dislikes of cartilage ability to adapt, how to support your cartilage, and then what the research says. So let's get into it without further ado. Looking at cartilage's likes and dislikes. This is a thing that literally blew my mind when I was in residency training. So residency and fellowship. Okay, so if you think of cartilage, like cartilage is made up of like a different cell in the body or a different type of tissue. And there's 3 types of cartilage in our body. And they're kind of like in different spots and make up different things. And it's just really cool. And I'm sharing this because a lot of people that have labral tears, it's a form of cartilage. It's not the same form of cartilage that is over the head of your femur, like kind of the hip joint and into the acetabulum, which is like the socket of the ball and socket joint, but it is a form of cartilage. It's cartilaginous substance. So some of these principles are like relatively the same, but cartilage does not like to be compressed and grinded. Okay. So I like to think of cartilage as a marshmallow. I've talked about this on the podcast a lot, but you think of it as a big, you think of one of those, just talking so fast that I'm not even articulating, but you think of one of those big plump marshmallows that you make a s'more out of, okay? And if I take the marshmallow and I smush it, it is going to be smushed for a little bit of time, okay? And I need, maybe, I don't know, like 5-10 minutes for the, optimal stimulus of repair for the marshmallows to kind of plump back up and fill with air. The cartilage is not dissimilar. It's going to de-plumpen and it's going to need specific time to open up and re-plump, okay? So if you imagine the cartilage shells as like that marshmallow, if I'm compressing it and I'm pushing that marshmallow down and then I'm grinding up against it, so I'm kind of like wearing and tearing some of that cartilage off, yeah, it's not really going to like that. Like, it's just not going to like that for a long period of time. Like you can smush it down and maybe rub against it for a little bit, but like a long period of time is going to make it be irritated. Okay. Now let's go to the converse. What cartilage likes. Okay. Cartilage likes to be compressed and decompressed. So it likes that period of having some stimulus come into it and then allowing it to be decompressed. And then it likes gliding without compression. Okay. So, let's go into kind of like more factorial examples of this that will make this more like mainstream for us. So if we think about the compression and gliding for long periods of time, let's think about this in terms of the hip. So if the hip is a ball and socket joint, and I'm going to have long periods of compression and kind of that grinding, a great example is like gardening. Okay. The amount of people that have come to me in my practice, in my time as a physical therapist, that have pissed off their hip, their knee with gardening, unprecedented. Can I tell you why? Because you start gardening and you do it for hours. It's like a whole day activity. Okay. So they're out there, they're like, getting into these weird positions. They're like, imagine like you're bending over, okay? And you're just compressed. Your hips are just compressed. And then you're just kind of grinding because you're like pivoting around and you're just like shoving that femur in the socket. And then you're just leaving it there. And you're just twisting over it and you're grinding and you're doing it for way longer than you would do really anything else, because once you start, you literally can't stop. Okay. So you're irritated. Another example is like a hockey goalie. Imagine the hockey goalie when they're sitting in that goal and they're literally like their knees are bent and their feet are splayed out to the side. That's putting their hip into the most compressed position with that like it's not maximum flexion, but they're in a lot of flexion and that internal rotation. And then they're just rotating around. So they're compressing and then they're grinding that hip. Okay, we see in research, hockey goalies have some of the highest incidences of labral tears. Well, duh, because they're compressing and grinding that hip. Gardening is one of the biggest symptoms that I see if people have exacerbated symptoms. Another thing is going to freaking Disney World, okay? People need a training plan to go to Disney World. Let me just walk you through an example of this. Okay, this isn't Disney World, but this is kind of a more personal example. So my husband's grandpa has osteoarthritis in his knee. We told him years ago, literally years ago, bike. He loves to exercise. He was walking way too much. He was having so much knee pain. We said, do 1 day of biking, 1 day of walking, 1 day of biking, 1 day of walking. No knee pain. He has no knee pain. He has no knee pain. Okay. He goes on a cruise, and homeboy walks. There's like the track around the cruise. He walks all of it. He's just freaking lapping that thing. He's going out to the excursions and he's walking and he's walking. He comes back from this trip so aggravated. Okay. He compressed and grinded that cartilage way too much. He didn't have the opposing thing. The opposing stimulus is going to be that compression, decompression with gliding. Okay. So the biking, let's take it here. The biking is the better example of how to compress, decompress, and kind of glide the cartilage back and glide the cartilage around itself. Imagine when you're on the bike for the hip and the knee, you're like getting that kind of just repetitive motion of like the knee coming together, coming apart, the hip coming together, coming apart, but you're having some of that decompression and then there's gliding going around. What's happening when you're doing that is you're taking the synovial fluid that this is the stuff that's not on Instagram, okay? Like this is the unsexy stuff that's not on Instagram. You're taking the synovial fluid and you're decreasing its thickness. So it can become kind of viscous and thick. You're decreasing its thickness and you're shoving that synovial fluid into the cartilage to nourish and hydrate the joint, okay? If I'm statically gardening and I'm just statically there and compressing the joint, there's not that like thinning of the cartilage and it's not being shoved into the joint. If I'm on the bike, I'm able to glide that cartilage and get it to shove into the joint. It's called imbibement. It's a beautiful process. Literally, this stuff makes me go crazy because I'm obsessed with it, but whatever, it's kind of weird. Okay, so my husband's grandpa did way too much compression with like that grinding motion via walking. And he came back and was literally so aggravated for so long. And every single family party that we had for 6 months, people would come up to us and say, you need to look at his knee. You need to look at his, you need to. And I'm like, we told you, get in the bike. He had stopped riding the bike at home. I think he like stopped going to the gym. So there was like a change in his schedule. He didn't have access to the bike anymore. And we're like, just get in the bike. Just get in the bike. Okay. He goes to physical therapy. Doesn't help. He's like so aggravated this whole time. And we're like, get him the bike. Okay. Guess what? 6 months later, they got him the bike. He's able to get back to his normal level of activity and his knee feels amazing. And I'm like, I don't even know. I'm like, if you guys don't want to listen to me, stop asking me questions. Because he was able to give the optimal stimulus of repair to improve the cartilage. Now, for that instance, like because he decompressed that marshmallow so much on that trip, he actually went above his cartilage's capacity. He was in there was a period of time where it was like the plumpness, the replumpness of the marshmallow was going to take a long time. It was just going to take a long time to recover because he depumped it so much. Like he did so much, not damage, but he like really injured that cartilage. He like sprained that cartilage. He irritated that cartilage a lot and it was going to take time to come back. If he had the bike, it probably would have healed faster. But for that, period of 6 months, he just really wasn't walking because it was so painful. And then we got him on the bike. And then now he's kind of back to walking and biking on like a, on a relatively fixed schedule because he knows what to do. But now guess what? He's so afraid to go on any vacations again because of the knee. Okay. So that's what I'm saying. We just got to doesn't that sound like us? Like we're like, oh my gosh, I had pain. Like I'm afraid to run ever again because of my cartilage, and then you lose the ability to do it. So for him, it's like, if we could educate him, like, hey, when you go on these adventures, a cruise is perfect because it's like you're sailing for a day and then you're out excursioning for a day. Like just bike while you're on the cruise. And then the next day you can save up your cartilage to go and, do the excursion, so on, so forth. So to recap that one, cartilage likes and dislikes, it really likes that like compression, decompression, or like that decompression with gliding. So imagine that biking motion. It does not like the compression with that kind of grinding sensation because it puts too much static compression on the cartilage. It depumpins it. It can almost sprain it and make it super irritated. So that is the likes and dislikes of cartilage. Moving on, let's go into cartilage training. Okay. This again is like literally one of my favorite things ever. And I think the earlier we can adopt this, the less of a chance we're going to be like my husband's grandfather, who really has to be extremely mindful of his cartilage because he's done so much relative damage to it over time. Okay, so cartilage training, tissue tolerance. So let's go for this here. Cartilage tissue tolerance right now, everyone has like a cartilage tolerance level. Okay. So if maybe you have a labral tear, maybe you have impingement, maybe you have dysplasia, maybe you have hip osteoarthritis, maybe you have knee pain, all of this stuff. Right now you have a resting cartilage tolerance level. Okay. So when you go for a run and go for a walk or whatever, like let's say your cartilage tolerance right now is like you could probably manage an average of 10,000 steps per day. Some days it's like 6,000, because or 2 to 6,000. Some days it's like 20,000 because you ran and went for a walk over the weekend. But over the week, you're kind of going through these like ebbs and flows. And you're like, that's kind of like my cartilage tolerance. Okay. One of my clients, she took her cartilage tolerance, which she has a labral tear and history of knee pain. She took her cartilage tolerance where we were kind of going up and down and doing all the things. And she took her talents to Disney World. Okay. And homegirl came back and had so much knee pain. And we can see that she was doing her normal week of running and, her training stuff, but she was also walking so much on top of that, like so much on top, like 30 to 40,000 steps a day. If we're we can't look at everything in just a vacuum because it's not just the cartilage. It's going to be it's going to be like the muscles and the tendons and the ligaments and all that stuff too. Like in your nervous system, all of it's kind of compiled into one. But like, if we're just pretending that it's just the cartilage present, she exceeded her tissue tolerance of that week. And now she was having knee pain. Okay. Let's say it was from the cartilage. She exceeded it. And it's just because her overall, like her load exceeded her general capacity. Okay. So let's say that she wanted to go to Disney World again and she didn't want that to happen. Well, then maybe we would just put her on a bigger training plan. We're like, hey sister, like you're currently running 2 days a week, which amazing. That's increasing your step count by, a lot per day, but you're about to go to Disney World and let's say you average 10K steps a day. In Disney World, every single day, you were averaging 40,000 steps a day or 30,000 steps a day. That is a huge percentage increase. So let's do this where we're just like, we're going to put you on some longer sessions, maybe 1 to 2 times a week that work with your schedule so that you're exposing your body to that demand. And then you're going to allow it to adapt over time. I did the same thing with one of my clients who went to Europe earlier this year. Yeah, it was Europe. She had an extremely low step count. She was not running. She was really not strength training. Like she was just working like a dog. You know what I'm saying? She's working a lot because she was preparing to go on sabbatical to go to Europe for a month. And I was like, okay, I've seen this play out before. You have hip pain, you have ankle pain, you're not really being active at all. And you're about to go to Europe and walk a ton every single day. So for her, above all else, it was getting on a strength training program that she could do consistently. And that was specific to her hip and ankle. And then also just increasing her step count. I was like, honestly, like before we get you into, running and all of this stuff, I was like, I need to know, which, we did a little bit of, actually we didn't do any running in the beginning. Reasons and preferences for that. But I was like, we need to get you walking. You need to do a long walk at least twice on the weekend. And then during the week, I need you increasing your step count. So you're like, your body's more prepared for this. And she was like, oh my gosh, I wish I honestly would have started sooner and done more preparation because I was sore when I was walking. And I was like, yes, because you have a resting tissue tolerance. So when I think of somebody's resting tissue tolerance, I understand the properties and the nature of cartilage. And I know that this can improve over time. Okay. So my client that I ramped up to go to Europe, who's to say how poorly this would have been if she did nothing going to that? You know what I'm saying? Conversely, I have a client now who has been working with me for about 6 months, and she has bilateral labral tears. She had just terrible tissue tolerance to walking, running. Like, she was so impacted by her labral tears. They were so incredibly painful. She worked with physical therapy for probably like 3 months and then continued to work with them as we started working together 6 months ago. She was still working with them. And as we started working together 6 months ago, we just started to slow, like 3 runs a week, started on the Alter G. Then we got, which is like an anti-gravity treadmill. She's running at like 80% of her body weight. We slowly took her off of that, integrated some ground running, and then started to increase her, ground running volume tolerance and her walking tolerance and her strength training. And we just slowly built up her tissue tolerance, where we were increasing the load, made sure she did good, had like a cutback week, allowed her body to recover. And then we increased the load, a cutback week, so on and so forth. So we're doing this practice of increasing her running, walking, and strength training volume to increase her tissue tolerance. And I say tissue tolerance because it's all of the tissues. But we know she has the bilateral labral tears, and we were doing that to improve their tolerance as well to activity, as she's kind of getting back up into running, and now she's training for Boston. So that's pretty cool. The other thing that's interesting about cartilage training, and this is another thing that was just blew my freaking mind, is that it is an inert tissue. It's an inert tissue, meaning it's non-contractile. So it's not like our muscle where it's like, if I have a bicep tear, like I have a tear in my bicep or like a strain in my biceps tendon, and I'm doing bicep curls, I'm like, oh, that hurts. Like, I'm like, that hurts right now. That hurts right now, immediately, right now. Cartilage is not as quick if it's not irritated. Okay. So it doesn't have necessarily that 1-to-1 ratio where it's like, okay, I do this thing and it's hurting right now. Sometimes it takes, or most times it takes a little bit longer for that process to start, where it's like, okay, I'm in Disney World and I'm walking and I'm running, and then maybe the next day I'm really sore. It's a little bit more latent because it takes more time to build up. Maybe that kind of like not inflammatory, but I guess it could be an inflammatory response. The word's just so overused. I hate the word inflammation. It's like my hips inflamed, and I'm like, okay. It takes time to build up that, like, we'll call it inflammatory process, and then for you to have enough stuff going on there to like elicit the receptors to tell your brain that it's painful. That's not cut and dry because our body's not a vacuum. Like, you might do something and it can be painful quickly, and that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not your cartilage, but typically cartilage does not have that, like, I'm doing it right now, it's painful right now approach. Typically it's like, I did this and then I'm realizing that I did too much. And then therefore I am now experiencing pain from that. And with this knowledge, something that I like to do in my own personal training is like, think of things that are like maybe heavy cartilage loaders. Okay. So I think about this oftentimes when I'm like on vacation, and typically like in my life, I like to run like 3 days a week, 3 to 4 days a week. It's just kind of like my sweet spot. I like to do a longer run on the weekend, and then 2 kind of like more just mid distance neutral runs during the week. Just works really well with my schedule, so on and so forth. When I go on vacation, oftentimes I don't have access, or sometimes I don't have access to a gym. And it's like, okay, the easiest thing for me to do is to run. And I love that. That's great. But it's like, okay, I run Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And then I'm like, my body just feels achy. Like, it just feels achy because I have not allowed myself to have that day of recovery in between running that I'm pretty much accustomed to, where it's like I go and I do the compressive and that grinding thing that my cartilage doesn't like. And then I give myself a day off and I allow it to replump and recover and regrow. And then I do my run the next day, and then I go for that. I have more variability in my schedule, which allows me to feel better with my cartilage. And this is just something that I like to think about. I'll go into a couple of different practicalities for that for everybody, but that's what I like to think about, where it's like, okay, if I'm on vacation and I'm like running 4 days in a row and I'm starting to feel achy, then I'll take a day off. Or I think the same thing about like backpacking. It's like, I just like backpacked for like, 3 days in a row, and I was coming up and then coming down, and it was like a lot of high impact. I'm literally terrible on the descent and backpack. So I'm like jamming into my knees and my hips because I'm so afraid. So the next day I'm like not going to go on a 6 mile run. I'm going to allow myself to have that recovery. And it's not necessarily something that I'll feel all the time where it's like, oh, my muscles are fatigued and my muscles are sore, like that delayed onset muscle soreness. It's more like, oh, I just know that this is a principle that I should just genuinely let my body recover, even though I can't necessarily feel it. And then what I will say about this is like, I personally just like to have variability in my schedule, but I also think about like ultra runners, like who literally, like I have raced ultra marathons. I think it's like my favorite form of racing. And I listen to so much ultra marathoning, like podcasts and content and stuff like that. I just love it. I think it's so fascinating. And I think about these people who are training super, super high mileage and are not injured. And it's because they've increased their tissue capacity or tissue tolerance so much. Okay. Like it is possible. It just takes intention. And I think everyone can kind of find like what's the most comfortable for them, like what is their sweet spot. And like, that is so multifactorial of schedule, of genetics, of all that stuff. And I think it just matters, what is the best for you. And like also just working with people of different ethnicities. It's fascinating. Like my husband and I talk about this all the time. We're like, we have just noticed that different ethnicities just have different, like they have different tissue cellular makeups. And sometimes people just have a lower like tissue tolerance to things than other people do. And I'm not going to go into specifics because I don't know. It's like anecdotal and it's just kind of something that we talk about, but it's like, we just have noticed that different ethnicity groups have different tolerances to different things. And if you're like, oh, I'm like always kind of getting injured, like it can be related to genetics and all that stuff. So I'm going to just move on for that one. And my biggest highlights from cartilage training is that it can be increased over time. It needs time to replump in. So if you're in a period of getting back into running, like allow yourself to have that recovery period. That's why in the initial times I'll have my clients run, Monday, take Tuesday off, run Wednesday, take Thursday off, run Friday, like have that space throughout the week so their cartilage can recover. And then we can work on increasing that over time. And it can be related to genetics. And also you might not feel it. You might not feel it right away because it's an inert tissue, meaning like, it's not like the bicep where you're like, oh, my bicep's torn and I'm using it and it's painful. Okay. Number 3, let's move on to cartilage support. So we just talked about specific things that you could do for your cartilage. It's crazy. Like I literally I remember just I remember being in residency and like typing my notes and being like doing this or prescribing this specific biking for my client because it's the optimal stimulus of repair for cartilage. Like, and just being like, oh my gosh, like I know so much, like I'm so smart. And that's amazing and true. But also like there's other tissues in the body and there's other factors that go into it. So let's talk about just like other things that are supportive for cartilage. There's so many things, like really everything. But let's just go into a couple of things here. So I often like to think of everything else supporting the cartilage. So if you guys have listened to my podcast, I'm obsessed with my kind of foundational pyramid for runners, having all of the tools to meet the demands of running so that when they go to run, they're like, my exercises have prepared me for this. Like that's what I want from my athletes. And I always start with looking at their coordination. Like, are they able to do things like if they have pain into their hip, are they able to like coordinate motions well around their hip where they're not just like, experiencing so much like increased compression at their hip. Like they're not having massive amounts of hip drop, or they're not like, leaning super far forward or super far to the side where they're just like compressing the heck out of their hip and they're like putting more compression and gliding through their cartilage. Do they have enough mobility so they're able to offload certain points of their hip? Or do they have enough stability? Like oftentimes with my labral tear dysplasia and impingement girlies, mostly like labral tear and dysplasia, they have a huge lack of stability. So instead of their joint, like instead of them landing beautifully and then pushing off to the next, they're landing, it's super sloppy and they're putting increased grinding into the joint. And then they're getting more of that cartilage compression and grinding. And then they're like, yeah, my hip hurts. So I'm looking at, do they have enough stability that they're like not wasting excess motion that could be causing excess grinding at the joint? I'm looking at things like endurance. So can they do like coordination, mobility, stability really well? Meaning like, can they land really well for 3 sets of 20, not just 3 sets of 10? That's another hill I could die on. Like, why is everything 3 sets of 10? That's literally not based in research in the slightest. If your PT is giving you 3 sets of 10 of everything, they're like, why? Why, Karen? Why? Which is hard because PTs are such likable people and you don't ever want to question them because they're just so nice to you. But sometimes you have to ask them, why are you giving me 3 sets of 10? Like, what is the research said behind that? And I think that we want to make sure that people are able to do these things for long periods of time. So they're set up for that endurance demand of running. And then we're looking at strength. Like, then we're getting into the 3 sets of 10 and the 3 sets of 8 or the 3 sets of 6 or whatever it is. And I'm looking at true strength training. I talk about this all the time with my clients. Like, strength training is not lifting lightweight. Okay. Like, that is something else. And when I'm looking at true strength training, where it's like they're able to do it, like if it's a lunge, they're able to do it extremely well coordinated. They have enough mobility to get into the motion. They're demonstrating excellent stability through the full range of motion, and they're doing anywhere from like 3 to 5 sets of like 6 to 12 repetitions at like an 8 to 7 to a 9 out of 10 rate of perceived effort. Like, those are general strength training principles. I could definitely go more into that, but when we're doing that true strength training, we're actually building resilience of our muscles, of our joints, of our joint cartilage, of our ligaments, of our tendons. It creates so much resiliency. It's kind of like a supercharge to the cartilage. It's like giving you the most, it's like injecting your marshmallow with like air and like, you know, something really firm, so that when you push down on it, it's less likely to deplumpen as much, and it's going to take less time for it to inflate. Okay. So cartilage support example, I have a client who she's super young. So she's like in high school and she has knee pain. She does a multitude of different sports and like, yeah, she has knee pain into her anterior knee. And I'm like looking at her mechanics and I'm like, her coordination is, it's actually not terrible. It's actually not terrible, but like she puts so much, the way she squats and jumps puts so much strain into her anterior knee. So she has so much strain going through the patellofemoral joint, which is like where the kneecap sits on the femur and kind of tibia region. And yeah, there's just so much stress going through there. And like, I was like, we need to work on your coordination of like decreasing the amount of shearing going into, which is shear, like that's the compression and grinding of the joint cartilage, so that every time you're doing your sports and you're jumping and you're doing all these things, you're not just having long-standing compression into the front of your knee. So we worked on her ability to coordinate that better, like her, you know, squatting, landing mechanics. And then we just worked on her general strength, and she's made marked improvements. Like now she just has knee pain with like extremely weird things, like sitting in positions for long periods of time, or like falling on her knee. They're not weird things, but it's just like extremely specific scenarios. Whereas previously it was like every time she was, you know, going to her specific sport, or every time she was, you know, doing the specific motions that were like putting a lot of force into her anterior knee. So cartilage needs to be supported by like a well-rounded exercise plan. And I just think it's fun. Like, it's fun to create a program for something like that and maybe have some of like the cartilage principles kind of wrapped up in there. So we went over cartilage likes and dislikes, cartilage training, like how to improve the tissue tolerance, and then also cartilage support. Now let's get into what the research says. So I have 4 articles that I diligently researched, and a lot of these things have been really brought up in kind of like my education, and I've been to multiple different seminars with some of these research articles, and I just think it's fascinating. Like, it's just so cool to see research debunking the like myths that running is bad for your knees, and like you need to stop moving when you're older because it's just going to make it worse and all of this stuff. So let's look at this first article, which is looking at it's looking at cartilage's response to running. So right away, it's looking at the acute cartilage response to running. So as soon as I go running, what's going on with the cartilage? So this is Coburn et al. This is a systematic review and meta-analysis. And it found that right after running, so right after the person went for a run, or these people went for a run, the MRI shows like small changes in the cartilage. So there's increased thickness and volume, there's increased composition marked by different signals. And these changes in this study were looked at as very minimal, and just were interpreted as normal mechanical / fluid shifts and not long-term cartilage damage in healthy runners. So I think about this here where it's like, if you think about going for a run and it's a really hot day out and you come back, your face is all red, you're sweating, you had like a cellular response at your like facial level to turn red, to sweat, like your like, heart rate is increased, your breathing rate is increased. Like there's that acute response and it's actually healthy. Like we think about that in terms of the cardiovascular system where it's like I stress the system and then I recover and then I actually get more fit. The next time I go run, maybe I'm able to run a little bit further or a little bit longer. And the more that I do that consistently with a good training plan, I'm able to recover better and therefore I get more fit. What this article tells me from what I know and what we now know about cartilage is that like I'm stressing it and then I'm allowing it to adapt and acclimatize or acclimate to the demands that I just put on it so that therefore the next time I go, it's like, yes, sis, I've been here, I've done this, boom, let's do it. I feel amazing. So we're seeing some local tissue changes, but we know that's how our body works. Like everyone's obsessed with lifting heavy now for bone mineral density. It's like you put that stimulus in there and then it allows it to recover, or it allows your body to be broken down and then therefore during recovery be broken back up and come back stronger. Okay, so let's look at the next one. This is looking at long-term running and cartilage structure from months to years. So this is Zhang et al. And in this study, it was looking at, so it was an imaging study looking at like for long-term runners, and long-term running, they found that long-term running was associated with increased cartilage thickness / volume in some regions, suggesting possible adaptations. So I thought that this one was interesting because okay, this is really interesting. We're seeing that where the person is maybe putting more load through is where they're having more like increased thickness and volume of cartilage. Okay. So we see this oftentimes, let's take it all the way to the end with bone spurs. Like people that have bone spurs, a bone spur is because there's been increased compression on a specific area, increased loading, and then therefore your body's going to lay down more cartilage because it's actually trying to like fuse it and get it to stop moving in that spot. So with people that have bone spurs, what we try to do is we try to improve their mechanics around the joint so that they're not putting as much compression through that area. What we might see with someone another example is like in basketball players, plyometric jumping athletes will actually see a lack of internal rotation due to increased growth of the cartilage at their femur, so the head of their hip, to increase their mechanical efficiency to like spring off and jump. So we're seeing that the cartilage is going to lay down on places for either like a mechanical advantage or because there's like more load going through that spot. So we're seeing maybe if someone has like a ton of cartilage in a specific area of their knee, maybe we're seeing they land more there. That is what I see a lot of times with my athletes, my gals that have labral tears, is that the side that has a labral tear, they actually lack a lot of control on that side because, and potentially therefore they're getting more relative grinding, or maybe they're actually starting to develop signs of osteoarthritis in that area because they're having more force and pressure go into there. So I like the study because it shows that number one, there's adaptation, but maybe there's like too much adaptation in a specific spot, and like working on those mechanics can allow you to maybe decrease like a higher incidence of osteoarthritis in a specific spot as you get older. So there's a reason to work with someone to improve your overall control, mechanics, coordination, strength, even potentially even running form after all of that stuff. Now, while you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, that's the reason. Okay. Mic drop. All right. Last one. Does more mileage equal more osteoarthritis? So this looked at Burfield et al. This was a survey. So it looked at, actually we have two more. So I'm thinking of the wrong one. But this next one is, does more mileage equal more osteoarthritis? And this is Burfield et al. 2023. And it found that mileage was not necessarily the number one factor in delineating if someone was going to have osteoarthritis. It actually found that it was a multitude of factors, classic, and some of the highest ones were like prior injury. Okay, so have you been injured in that place priorly? Because if you have, you probably have lack of mechanics there, maybe more fear around that spot. Maybe you're not loading it as well. So I found prior injury, rapid spikes in load. Okay, Disneyland, body mass. Okay, fine, sure, whatever. And symptoms as a much more or more than running standalone exposure. So it found prior injury, rapid spikes in loading, body mass, and having specific symptoms as more meaningful to developing osteoarthritis than just having a really high mileage program. And to me, this really breaks down the importance of having like a strong running hygiene. Like, if you're injured, we're not running through it. Okay. Are you doing rapid spikes in your load? Because if you are, stop. Like, have some sort of training plan where you're I always talk about this with my clients, like, especially as my clients get into their 40s and 50s, they're like, I went for this hike and I had a huge flare up. And I'm like, when's the last time you hiked for that long? And they're like, probably last year. Why? And I'm like, well, we exceeded our tissue tolerance and capacity. So therefore, if you actually want to hike that much, let's just put more cardio in your plan consistently, or let's put more hiking in your plan consistently. So, or, if you want to hike in the summertime, like, let's just make sure you're hiking consistently. So you're not just doing these huge loads, or let's make sure your strength training plan is supporting you best to get to that. I could just really go on and off about that, but really having that well-rounded plan is going to allow you to have the best outcome. Okay, last thing we're going to talk about is, does running increase the risk of having knee arthritis? This is the survey of 3,804 marathon runners by Hartwell et al. And it found that that running marathons does not increase hip/knee arthritic risk, and may even have association with lower odds of knee surgery for osteoarthritis. We've just seen this time and time again in the research. I remember one of these articles came out when I was in PT school, and like, it shook the earth that like people that were recreational runners actually had a lower prevalence of knee osteoarthritis than their counterparts at the same age that were less active. And honestly, we just go back to that joint lubrication or that imbibement process that we talked about in part one, where it's like that decompression or compression decompression with gliding. Like, running gives us some of that compression decompression and gliding, with having like that higher speed of activity, which can decrease the viscosity or the thickness of the synovial fluid and like shove it into our joint, as long as we have good like running hygiene and maintenance, where it's like we have good mechanics, we have good strength training routines, we're not running 7 days in a row, and we're allowing ourselves to have that stress and then recovery cycle. So we talked about a lot on this podcast today. We talked about cartilage likes and dislikes, cartilage training, that has the capability to train itself with appropriate measures, how to support your cartilage with a robust training plan, and what the research says. My biggest hope for today's episode is that you're leaving feeling less hopeless and more inspired. Okay. I remember the shifts that I made in my brain, in my heart, when I was learning this stuff in physical therapy school and then residency and then fellowship, and the way that I've seen it play out with my athletes. And I'm here to say that if you are in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, it's 50s, it's time to start in older, of course, but like, if you're in like your 30s and 40s, it's time to start implementing these things now, these procedures, these like getting a good strength training routine, ensuring that your mechanics and your control and your stability and your mobility is really, really good, so that when you're doing your strength training, you're not just like ramming in poor foundations, that you have some sort of a training plan, whether if you're a recreational runner or not, like you're more like, you like to do races and you want to train for things, like having a smart training plan. This is so important because it's going to set you up for success. Like, the things that you're doing now is going to set you up for success when you're in your 50s, when you're in your 60s, when you're in your 70s, when you're in your 80s. If you're letting something derail you now, future pace yourself, because you are not going to be able to do the things that you want to do in your 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s if you're not working on overcoming these things now. Some of it's physical, some of it's mental. It's a battle together, but like, I'm here for you. If you're like, Sarah, I know I need to get back to running. I don't need to run 75 marathons a year or race 20 times a year, but like I know I want to run consistently and I know that I like to race, sometimes and I think it would be amazing, or I want to run socially, or I want to be competitive, whatever it is, I'm here for you. I see you. And feel free to check out the show notes, links, episodes. The links in the show notes is what I'm trying to say. And I genuinely would just love to know what's going on. Like if you're like, Sarah, this is where I'm at. I don't necessarily want to work with you. I just want some of your thoughts and opinions. Great. Book a strategy call with me. If you're like, Sarah, I don't know. Like, I don't even know what you do. Like, can you help me in some way? Like, book a strategy call. If you're like, Sarah, I know you're my person, book a strategy call. Reach out to me on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. The Hip Talk Sarah is my handle, YouTube, on all of these things. Literally, it is my dream to educate the population on these things so that you can not feel hopeless and instill confidence so that you can do the things that you want to do and show up as your best self for all of the years to come. So I genuinely mean that. Reach out. I'm in my DMs. It's me. It's nobody else. There's no one else there. Sometimes I have a bot that, delivers things, but it's me. Okay. I'm here for you. And I hope to see you on the next episode.